All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out today for another Ether Engage. We got Jennifer Paukman from Faulhaber. She's Director of Social and Digital. She's also Professor of Social Media at TMU University and Principal Consultant at Honey Social Media. Jennifer, thanks for coming out today. And I'm really excited to dive into the future of social media, PR, and brand experiences with you. Do you want to just give yourself a brief intro? I know I kind of introduced you, but I'm sure you can do a better job than I can. That's awesome. And yeah, I can vouch for Intuit. As anyone who's kind of followed Ether knows, we did a really cool campaign with Intuit TurboTax at the beginning of last year, integrating games into their activation and then having an ongoing experience where they had games to make taxes more fun for students. And yeah, I think Intuit really leans into doing things that are a little more fun, a little more exciting, and more risk adverse to a degree to connect with the younger audiences. So that's amazing. Getting into social media and PR and looking at brand experiences and how things evolved over the years, it seems like things have shifted from being brand controlled messaging to consumer driven narratives. 92% of consumers trust earned media, such as recommendations from real people, over traditional ads. Um, um, and so, what I'd like to hear is sorry. Brands need to prepare for more decentralized AI-driven content ecosystems where direct, authentic consumer interactions becomes key to loyalty and growth. What's your perspective on that, Jennifer? That's great. And it's becoming more authentic to a degree. While things are technology's sort of bringing in this whole new artificial layer into social media. But are people tying into these artificial intelligence integrations into social media, or do you think the ones that are really flourishing are on more of the authentic side, working with brands from there? That's great. Sorry, I just got a note that the live stream isn't getting your microphone. Um, so I think you might have muted your mic, but not your you on the restream. Um, so you wanna mute the audio, but not your mic. Um,
Okay. Can you hear me now?
we will see. I think so. Let me
Oh no,
just.
did no one hear anything I just
We got you in the immersive side, but not on the LinkedIn side, which is fine. It's all good. We'll
Okay.
we'll, we'll recover from there. But it looks like I can hear you now, so I can unmute you here, mute here, and yeah. So we'll go into the next question. Thinking of social media as a ultimate top of funnel strategy. Platforms are the biggest awareness drivers in modern marketing. But the challenge is moving audiences from passive scrollers to active customers. How are brands succeeding in driving audience from social media to their purchase or whatever their conversion path is?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I think many brand leaders still see social media as just an awareness tool. And sometimes the value of it is in question. And I think that's a really outdated mindset because the reality is conversion paths are no longer linear and traditional last touch attribution models don't really capture the full picture. So that's where something like media mix modeling becomes essential because then you can map out all of the multiple touch points that consumers have with your brand versus just where they converted on your website or through Google search, etc. So at Faulhaber, we've really married the storytelling power of PR with the data-driven precision of performance marketing. And we trademarked our approach called powered PR, which essentially amplifies any earned media. So like a news article you might get in media or UGC or influencer content to not only build that brand love, but actually drive measurable ROI and really break down those silos between, here's our PR team doing all of that great relationship building, and then here's our performance marketing team that's really driving results. And through that, you can see really seamless integrated journeys that move audiences from awareness to action. Speaking about the journey not really being linear anymore, it's more of an infinite loop. So a constant cycle of discovery, exploration, review, and participation. Customers aren't following that set path of awareness to conversion, but they're moving fluidly between inspiration and purchase. They're influenced by the content they see, the communities they build, and the convenience. So brands that succeed, they don't just capture attention, they create interactive, shoppable, and hyper-personalized experiences that meet consumers where they are, and really drive that word of mouth commerce at scale. So social platforms aren't really just places to browse anymore. They're search engines, they're entertainment hubs, they're retail ecosystems all in one. And brands that win activate those communities through influencers, brand advocates, and really just make discovery, research, and purchase frictionless and engaging. So speaking of that social awareness building funnel, it's not just pushing content, but building real connections and delivering inspiration at the right time and creating experiences that drive not only awareness and engagement, but also sales, conversions, and ROI.
That's amazing. Now, have you come across any like really cool examples that have stood out to you on getting people to where social's the search engine and then they're trying to be put into a funnel? Is there any experiences that have really stood out to you that you've seen in the market?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of fashion and beauty brands, and I think people are often searching different ingredients like retinol, for example, and then finding products through that. TikTok made me buy it. That hashtag is is so popular, and there's a lot of stats from TikTok around how people are discovering through search and driving to sales. There was one really cool example too that I saw from Walmart where they created like a custom gaming experience, and it was shoppable, so you could buy products right in the space, which I think is a really, really cool and interesting way to bring in some of that immersive brand sort of landscapes and make them shoppable.
Yeah, the gaming side and what we really focus on Ether is like going into the emotional connections with the brand and giving consumers an experience where they feel rewarded by the brand, they feel more connected, they have fun with the brand, and they learn from it in different ways. So if you think of like the customer journey cycle, it's the consideration phase up front that really gets people going from social media and the awareness side, moving into the purchasing phase. And there's that layer in between where games and experiences are really exciting. Walmart's tripled down this year. They have 3 different platforms that they've built games with. There's Minecraft, Roblox, and Spatial, and they're going hard on the gaming side to drive a new level of social gaming and social buying in these platforms. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's really exciting what the moves that Walmart's doing in the metaverse and in these immersive experiences and games. So moving on, thinking about AI in social engagement, is it enhancing? Is it replacing social? How do you see AI seamlessly moving into the social space? Because it's pretty obvious it's not going anywhere. It's just got to get better.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's been this rise of like AI influencers and AI created content, which I think is cool when you're the first to do it or when it's new. But eventually, I think because consumers are already having so many trust issues and trouble kind of discerning what's real and what's not, that almost creates inauthenticity and inauthentic experiences. So I'm always an advocate of authentic community building and relationship building on any platform. But I do think that AI has really revolutionized social workflows. So manual tasks like social listening are now so much simpler because of AI. I was even talking to a former coworker about an AI platform that allows you to analyze video content. So you can tell if a brand is mentioned without watching hundreds of hours of videos, and it'll automatically do that. So it just really saves teams time. There's another TikTok variation where you can input different versions of video hooks and it'll create like hundreds of different versions of ad content, and then choose and optimize towards the top performing one. And a lot of the ad platforms have AI built into them to help you pick what copy is going to perform best in different variations, what creative is going to perform best. So I think it really helps maximize success and performance while optimizing efficiencies. But I still do think authenticity remains key. So at Faulhaber, we use AI to drive personalization and scale, but always with that human oversight to ensure emotional depth, because AI can analyze trends, optimize content, automate responses, but it's really the humans that refine, contextualize, and foster those real connections. Even for community management, like chatbots can handle, generic FAQs, but community managers are the ones that are really building relationships, building brand love, and creating more engaging interactions with your brand. So I think the future isn't AI versus humans, it's AI powered, human led, and brands that master this balance will create personalized, authentic, and high impact experiences.
That's great. And yeah, the hyper personalization is going to be a huge opportunity. And like where you kind of led was around utilizing the data, and AI is obviously based off of millions and millions and millions of data points. So now that social media can like be leveled up with AI and getting this data, it's becoming more and more important to capture that data and create experiences that drive value, so you can understand who your customers are, what they're doing, and what their buying behaviors are across the board there, and build those personalities with them. And that's definitely aligned with what we're doing at Ether in building out our platform that understands the emotional side. So we're doing things like tapping into Reddit and like pulling sentiment analysis reports to drive an understanding of how people felt about the experiences and felt about the brands, to determine like what is this emotional brand lift that's happening, and brand sentiment that's happening, and utilizing social media from that perspective.
That's
There.
really cool. Like I always say that social media is about people, not brands. And the main thing you want to do is be audience centric. So figure out what your customers' needs are, what are their challenges, what are their wants, and how can our brand help them? And then create content from that perspective so that you're really building that engagement.
That's great. I just want to ask you to do some movement on in the immersive space so you don't get kicked.
Thank
Jen.
you.
But other than that, we'll move on to the next question here. So the data dilemma. A lot of the social media platforms, most of them are keeping the data hidden from people now, brands and companies that are advertising with them. So you're tapping into these audiences, but what they're calling them walled gardens, where Facebook, Instagram, TikTok don't give you access to the first party data. With cookie depreciation, privacy regulations tightening, how are you approaching audience insights beyond the platform restrictions? Are you exploring zero-party data strategies, interactive content, or own community engagement, just to future-proof your brands and clients' data collection?
I mean, we saw this with the looming TikTok ban, where all of these creators suddenly could have lost, massive audiences that they had curated over time. So I think owning your data and owning your audience relationships is really important, and moving some of those audiences and that data into places that you can store it yourself is key. So at Faulhaber, we focus on zero-party data through interactive content and polls, exclusive experiences, and direct data sharing through those experiences. And we also help clients invest in owned communities, so newsletters, loyalty programs, brand-led platforms, even data dashboards that are owned outside of the platforms themselves. Because I think really it's about, not relying on audience intelligence through those platforms, but building those direct connections that drive long-term engagement and smarter marketing decisions through your own data houses.
That's great. And like thinking about that, what you're building there in like a perfect world, what would like the ideal dashboard look like for you and your clients? And what are the like the key KPIs that you're looking to collect with your zero party and first party data?
It really depends on the objectives that we're trying to achieve. So it's not really a one size fits all answer. But social data, I definitely look at engagement over followers, because you could have a million followers, but if they're not engaging with your content, they're kind of not really as valuable as 100 really engaged people that are super loyal advocates of your brand. So I think engagement's really important. I think conversions are also really important, and people don't always make that connection between social and conversions, but there's ways to map out how much traffic we're driving, how much that traffic converts, and looking at the whole user journey and not just, okay, socials over here, webs over here, emails over here. Like, it's really about that integration and looking at it from the customer's perspective, because the customer doesn't see you as different channels. They see you as one brand.
That's great. And where do you find, like, are there any strategies or any ideas that you've seen stand out in the market that really start to drive that conversion for customers and drive them from social to collecting that data from them?
Yeah, so I'll use an example of a potential beauty client launch. So let's say we have a client that's launching a new product. We might start with an influencer marketing campaign, seed out the product to those influencers, have them try it, create content, put that on social, and back that with paid, for example, to grow, since we're starting essentially a new channel with no followers. From there, we can drive audiences to a landing page, and on that landing page have exclusive offers. Maybe they sign up by email to get first access to that product launch, or an invite, or maybe they could win an immersive brand experience. So I think it's taking people through that journey, capturing that data in any way that we can, and then marketing to them from there. But then also, once they're on your website or engaging with your social content, then you can remarket to them. So maybe once the product actually launches, we do a remarketing campaign with different messaging that's very specific to the call to action we want, which is driving sales. Maybe there's emails that are more specific to driving sales. Maybe there's blog content that takes, if we did like media pitching for earned media, maybe we take some of that and put it in the blog content and SEO optimize it, or put search behind it. So it's really like looking at that whole big picture and integrating all the touch points, but making sure that the data drives back to you in some way and that you can have that measurable result that you're looking for.
That's great. Yeah. And I think, data is so important in the sales process and the marketing process, and understanding who your customers are. At Ether, we're all about building these interactive experiences that drive more accurate data collection, and we're seeing like numbers of like 83% year over year growth, and driving value in that sense. But we're on our data capture side, what we're also doing is tapping into like the devices and other opportunities. So think of it as you're like using your phone, it's going to record someone's face when they're doing the experience. And then we're going to use tools like machine learning and AI predictions to understand how the consumer had an emotional connection to that experience. So that's just going to allow us to optimize those experiences as we scale with the brands that we work with. So
Yeah. And
really, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that goes back to the whole personalization piece. Like, you don't want to have the same message for every person, because everyone's different. Everyone has different needs. So once you have all of that data collected, you can come up with really personalized experiences and messages for different audiences.
Yeah. And personalization is huge, especially with AI being able to understand more and more and make predictions for people. Have you seen any examples of like modern personalization usage? Not like your typical, hey, I'm going to send an email and put your name and say, hey, Jennifer, in the email, but more something that's using data beyond and personalizing the experience for the customer.
I mean, I think retargeting is a really great example of that, where like if you connect it to your Shopify and then someone has something in their cart and abandons it, and then that item follows them around everywhere they go on the internet. Like, I think there's so many amazing capabilities, and that's just scratching the surface, but it's the first example that kind of comes to mind, where like, oh, hey, I was just looking at that and now I'm seeing it in all of my display ads everywhere I'm looking.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's kind of had the scenario where they've mentioned something in passing in a conversation with their friend, and then all of a sudden I get advertisements for it all the time.
They're always listening.
Yeah, the big brother's there listening to you. But yeah, definitely the retargeting and understanding of what people are shopping for is very helpful in the entire process there. And having that data drives a lot of value.
Yeah, I think what I would love to see is like taking the idea of audience personas and actually being able to get that granular to like what are your in like beyond just your demographics, but like what are your interests, what are your behaviors. Like it's a little creepy, but it's also really interesting from a marketing perspective to be able to market at that level of granularity so that the message is resonating so much with your audience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, the more you know, the better. And obviously, as the world, everyone's becoming more and more aware of their data and the privacy around it. So it's more important than now than ever to start collecting your own data and building your own CDPs and different data platforms for your brands to drive value and drive understanding of your customers. Moving on, thinking about the future of influencer and community engagement, shifting from vanity metrics to real ROI-driven partnerships, brands are focusing on micro communities that and value-driven collaborations and are seeing better conversions, with up to 61% of consumers trusting influencer recommendations over brands. How are you evolving your approach to influencer strategy and own community engagement here?
Yeah, I think it's really important that influencer marketing evolves beyond just that awareness phase. And I've been seeing a lot of brands prioritizing performance-based partnerships where ROI is directly measurable. So less of that vanity metric of like, oh, they got this many views or they have this many followers, where macro and celebrity level influencers still remain really powerful for that brand awareness and mass reach. The more micro and nano level really can drive strong conversions because they have that really highly engaged audience and they maybe tap into a niche community. So did some research around like TikTok sub communities and there was like cottage core and like such random things, but these communities exist and they're thriving. Like Book Talk is another one where, if you are marketing a book, like that would be a really great place to connect. So I think pairing that with influencer to affiliate models. So not just having the reach as a measurement or impressions or followers, but actually tying it to compensation and conversions, whether it's through like discount codes or trackable links or revenue sharing opportunities where the influencer gets maybe a cut of the sales they're making. That's, I think, how you can really transform influencers into true brand partners and bridge some of that more storytelling power of traditional kind of PR with more of that measurable impact beyond just vanity metrics.
That's great. And I think with all these micro communities and nano communities that are coming around, how do you manage something like that, where like, okay, I have a group of 1,000 people that are into cottagecore, and I got this book group that I can kind of tap into, and like there's so many different communities all around. As somebody who's like a high level social media marketer, how do you stay tied into all these communities and understand it with the tools you have available today?
I mean, I think the best marketers are constantly obsessed with their audience and want to know everything about them. So I think it's partially being really in tune with your audience and understanding them and doing the research to find out like what are their kind of what I mentioned. And hopefully you have the data to back it up. Like what are their interests? What are their behaviors? How can my brand help them? And kind of starting there. And then I think it's not just on you to research those communities yourself, but beyond trying to immerse yourself in it as the brand person, like connecting to people who are in those communities and talking to them about what they think makes sense for their own community. So whether it's getting feedback or input from your audience or working with creators who are in that space who can help you be a bit more authentic in it rather than the brand kind of coming in. Like there's that one meme of like, hello children. And it's like the older guy and he's in school and he's like trying to blend in with the youth. Like you don't want to be that brand. You want to be, authentic in your partnerships and making sure that you're actually speaking to the communities that you're engaging with.
That's great. And thinking about it more in the future, how is that role going to shift in like understanding with like the tools, and where does your vision go with that?
What do you mean? Sorry.
So, like what as like we're seeing social media is evolving, the way community people are connecting through communities are evolving. What like, and with AI coming in, how can you utilize these new technologies, and where do you see what, I guess, more in like an ideal scenario, what would be like the best tools for you to maximize your role from there?
I think social listening is really important in that. So getting an understanding of sentiment and using AI to do it rather than manually going through hundreds of comments, and really being able to kind of synthesize what the main thoughts are of your audience. So that would be one really great tool. I also think that using tools, as you mentioned, to create really interesting brand experiences. So whether it's like AR or gaming or virtual try-ons, and collecting data that way as well, that'll help you, that's a tool to help you understand your audience better and create more experiences that resonate with them.
That's great. Um, yeah, I think the way things are going to evolve, it's a matter of like finding new ways to educate yourself on the customers, if you kind of narrow it down. So as we come up with new technologies, you're going to be able to understand who the audience is for the brands that you work with, and drive value from them in that perspective, and making these communities more engaging, and building advocates for the brands.
100%.
With that in mind, there's so many people out there right now doing the exact same thing you're doing, or everyone else is doing. And there's a lot of content oversaturation. Attention spans are declining. What are like brands need to find new ways to cut through the noise. And social video consumption has increased by 84%. But short form isn't always the answer. Interactive content, gamification, deeper brand engagements are rising alternatives. As consumer expectations evolve, what strategies are you testing to stay ahead of the content fatigue?
Yeah, it's definitely prevalent. And I think short form video alone isn't really enough anymore. Um, Interactive content is something I truly believe in, whether it's gamifying your social content, creating seamless e-commerce experiences, um, and being innovative and ahead of the curve. Like, I feel like oftentimes people will say, like, what's a brand that you really like that's doing something really cool? And I like looking at that, but I'm also like, let's come up with new ideas that no one's done before, and try that and see if that sticks. So I think the future of engagement really lies in creating those experiences that captivate audiences rather than simply deliver information. Um, we talked about immersive, sort of interactive brand experiences, and I think doing things a bit differently than what they've typically seen will really help capture their attention. We talked about virtual environments, gaming, even AR filters are kind of an interesting way for brands to interact with people. And integrating new technologies into your strategies not only captures attention, but also creates those deeper emotional connections. I feel like customers' expectations are really high, and they really expect those frictionless sort of shopping experiences and that personalization. Um, so just continuing to make sure that we're not only selling, but also creating interactions and engagement, and just building those meaningful, long-lasting connections with audiences. I think that'll help ensure brands stay relevant in their audience's minds in a world that's oversaturated with content.
And the relationship between the customer and the brands and their products are changing as well. Like, so if you're like, Amazon is a good example, they have view furniture in your home kind of thing, and it's amplifying the shopping experience for customers, because they're getting this new tool to understand exactly and find exactly what they're looking for during shopping experiences from there. Another good example is like virtual try-ons, where you can see how you look in a dress, or see how glasses look on your face. There's a lot of value in the whole shopping experience that's evolving using the technology there. How do you see these experiences kind of shifting in or moving the social platforms into like more of a commerce experience moving
Yeah, I
forward?
mean, I think there's an element of creating engaging content where you can have that interaction right in platform. There's shoppable content, which is really great. There's branded content in games and immersive environments. So I feel like the more seamless it is and the more authentic it feels, then consumers won't even question it. Like, oh, that makes sense that I'm, on Snapchat using a TurboTax filter. Like it just using the TurboTax example. But I think making sure that brands have those opportunities to come into the social world in ways that kind of make sense for that brand and don't feel sort of like cheesy or icky is really a great opportunity. And I think a lot more brands could be doing it, but aren't, for the fear of like, oh, it's too risky or it's something new. And that's really an outdated way of thinking and it needs to shift.
Definitely. And I just obviously a lot of the big brands are making these moves because they understand that they need to start making a change or else they're going to be left in the dust, which is cool, exciting, and scary, but depends on what side of the table you end up on there. So thinking about that, and first I'd love to ask anybody who's watching on LinkedIn, we got a nice chat going on, or anybody here, would love to see if you share any questions or anything for us moving forward, because we'd love to have more of the audience engaged in what we're doing. So think about that while we go through this last question that Jen and I have prepared, and then would love to answer any questions from the audience. So getting started in the last question, the future of your role in marketing and brand experience is going to be changing. Obviously, the evolution of social data and technology, marketing leaders are becoming more architects of digital-first brand ecosystems. It's about real-time audience intelligence, omni-channel brand experiences, and interactive engagement strategies. Looking ahead, how do you see your role evolving, and what shifts in brand marketing excite you the most?
It's interesting because there aren't a lot of people who have 15 years of social media marketing experience. So even from when I started to today, like what has kept me relevant in my role is constantly learning and evolving and not being afraid to take risks, right? So I think what excites me the most is that opportunity to continue to elevate audience relationships in new and impactful ways through these innovative tools and technologies that we've talked about, but also being ahead of the curve, always learning, finding fresh ways to connect, new ways to do things. Just integrating all of the different things and tactics and channels into larger strategies that meet customers at every touch point, making sure brands show up consistently, they're relevant, they're valuable to their audiences. Some really exciting kind of things on the horizon are, AI and AR, immersive experiences, but really the magic happens when everything is holistic and you're thinking about beyond just the individual tools to create those deep, meaningful connections. So I think the future is not just about staying relevant, but building impactful and authentic relationships, blending creativity and cutting edge technology to make lasting impressions. And it's not really just about keeping pace with change, but it's about driving it, constantly evolving, and making sure that brands are undeniable and unforgettable in the hearts and minds of their audiences. It's, a really exciting time to be in the space. Technology and strategy are colliding in really interesting ways. And I think the possibilities are sort of endless.
Definitely. And it's with the AI boom, we just see constant growth with people who are taking advantage of it. It amplifies what you're doing with work. It amplifies your access to information. And as AI starts to evolve more, we're going to see like agents. So even like your workflow is going to become faster and more amplified. And it's just going to help us evolve as a society all around. And seeing that in marketing really excites me because it just makes it a lot more accessible to everyone. And people can, like, if I was running my company, I can just go to ChatGPT and ask it to write me a social strategy, and it'll write me something that's like, maybe it's not like advanced where I would hire somebody like Jen to come and really build out something in depth that's going to drive emotional connection, but it's going to give me a good foundation on what I need to do. And if I have, like, I'm a small business or something like that, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for me there. So that's really exciting, and it's great to see that you're not hiding away from it and more using it in the right way to amplify your experiences versus just using it to be your entire offering to your to those brands.
Yeah, there's a couple things I can probably bounce off of that. I think the first is like there's a bit of a sea of sameness on social where like they've taken like a landmark at a travel destination and shown like 100 different photos that are the same photo but different people taking it because it's like so similar in so many ways. So there's like a bit of a double-edged sword with AI generated content around that. Same thing with the captions and the copy. Like if AI is generating all of our captions, they're all kind of going to sound the same. And there's that human element that's missing. But what's great about it is, you know, as a strategist, when I'm staring at a blank page, getting that starting point that you can then build off of. So it's almost like a collaborative relationship with AI where it's like, it can start you off, you can iterate, it can iterate again, and then you kind of get to some middle ground together. So there's that piece of it. And the other piece is the data synthesization. So like, you know, looking at 100-page documents and asking it to synthesize them. So then you can get all of the key insights and takeaways, or even looking at social data and getting it to synthesize that. Like that's the part that's really exciting because that part doesn't need as much manual sort of thinking, and you can go in and take what it's synthesized and then build on that. So it's always that like AI and human collaboration together.
Yeah, that's great. And that it's funny. I'm part of this AI coffee house group, and we were doing a little showing off of some stuff we're playing with. And I built a little AI agent that whenever one of my advisors, he sends me an email, and his emails are like essays. So whenever he sends me one, what I'll do is I'll run it through this AI agent, and it will synthesize and like break down the most important key points in the email, and then resend the email to me so I get a refined TLDR on his email, which has been hilarious but also helpful there.
And as it evolves, I'm sure it'll start to become a bit more seamless in its generation of things. But for now, you know, I think it still needs that like that human touch.
Definitely. So we got a question from LinkedIn here from Michael. He's asking, what's the risk ahead of the curve you are hoping to get an engagement to bring it to life?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
What is the next risk ahead of the curve you are hoping to get an engagement to bring it to life?
I mean, that's a pretty broad question. Like, I guess depending on the brand, their level of risk adversity could be different, right? So having an AI influencer could be risky to one brand versus, you know, doing a lo-fi video of one of their team members could be risky to another. So there isn't one specific risk that I see as kind of being something to overcome. But I definitely think there is a bit of disconnect around maybe some of the more interesting brand activations, like some of these AR experiences or that immersive tech that will be interesting to see kind of brands overcome, especially if they're more traditional and they're thinking around, you know, what are our ways to interact with audiences and technology.
That's great. Yeah. So do we have anybody in the immersive space that has a question? Anybody else on LinkedIn? I think we're probably good. There's a good little chat, but no questions happening on LinkedIn. But I think we can wrap things up. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming out today. Very informational, inspiring, and exciting to learn more on how to engage communities and drive more value for your brands that you work with, or people can use it with brands, companies that they work with. great strategies, great opportunities, and it's exciting to see where you're going. And I'm excited personally with Ether to collaborate with you to drive more customers and make successful brands.
I'm excited as well. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining.
All right, thanks.
Okay, see you.